Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we do some fall cleanup in my side walkway bed. So let's go. It is the end of September and there are so many projects to be done in the garden. I'm sure you know what I mean. I wanted to come out here and just do a little bit of cleanup in this flower bed, and I figured I'd bring you along and I'd also do a little mini garden tour of this area because I think it looks really pretty this time of year. I'll start by putting the dimensions of this flower bed up on the screen just to give you some perspective. And also, this is the south side of my house, and right over here is my side porch. As we step off of my side porch, I want to point out a few things. Over here is a cold frame that I received from my sister-in-law a few years ago. She had made that for me, and that was super nice of her. I'm hoping to use that this winter and next spring, and I'll show you how I plan on using it. We have a gorgeous pot right here that I put together during the early spring months, and it really has taken off. The coleus looks a little crazy, but that's because I'm letting it go to seed so I can collect the seeds from it. We have the beautiful Joe Pye weed. I absolutely love this plant, and notice that it's the end of September and how beautiful it looks this time of year. And right behind the Joe Pye weed is a type of ornamental grass or miscanthus. During the next few weeks, the grass will be sending off its beautiful feathery plumes, and I'll be sure to show you that in a future video. At the base of the Joe Pye weed is a perennial mum. We had planted that there a few weeks ago. In fact, I made a video showing you my process for planting that mum as well as some other mums, and also we talked about how to overwinter the mums so that it's a perennial and comes back next year. Any related videos will be found in the description below in case you're interested. Towards the front of this flower bed, all around the perimeter of the bed, are perennial dianthus. There are a couple of different colors, and it looked gorgeous during the early spring months when it was in full bloom. And then I made a video showing you my process for cutting it back or pruning it back really hard. It came back with a second flush of flowers, and even though the flowers are a few just here and there, I'm still really enjoying them this time of year. And the evergreen foliage on the dianthus also looks very, very pretty. Right over here is a small-leafed rhododendron. It's quite large in size. I am planning on removing it from this flower bed this year because I'd like for it to continue to be large in size, but not necessarily in this flower bed. I think it would look great towards the outer perimeter of my yard, basically where the lawn ends and where the woods begin. As we move this way, you'll see there's more of the dianthus towards the front of the flower bed. And right behind the pink dianthus is a different variety of dianthus. And it has more of a bluish green colored foliage to it. It's very, very pretty. On this other side of the flower bed, you'll notice some perennial mums that have been here for a few years now. And they are looking so beautiful right now. I had shown you in a previous video my process for cutting them back a couple of times during the season so that they would be nice and compact. Because if you don't do that with your perennial mums, they tend to be very tall and leggy. So I'm really enjoying how they're looking. And then we also, in a previous video, had planted some more perennial mums this year. We have this white one here. We have a pinkish colored one over here. And we have a coral colored one that's right over here. And then finally, we have a yellow one that's right here. We had put some biotone starter fertilizer in each of those holes, and we made sure to get those mums planted early in the season so that the roots could really develop. And as we're looking in this direction of the flower bed, you'll see that I also have a nice big clump of the Joe Pye weed over here. It put on a really pretty show. It is just starting to go by, but that's okay. It really still looks so beautiful with its color this time of year. Now that I've done a mini tour of what the flower bed looks like, let's go ahead and start cleaning up this bed so that it really looks nice as we enter the fall season. This over here is a lupin plant, and it's already gone by and the seeds have already dropped. I should have cut the plant back earlier during the season, but I didn't get to it. We're just going to go ahead at the base of the plant and we're just going to cut it back. There are a bunch of sea holly that have gone to seed. I had shown you in a previous video my process for collecting and storing those sea holly seeds. I want to go ahead and I actually want to cut back all of the plants that have gone to seed, and I'll save all the seeds, but I don't want them to drop in this flower bed. I'm going to use a large gallon-sized bag just to collect all the seeds, and I'm going to use hand pruners to do the cutting. In this bag are the seeds as well as non-seed materials. On a different day, I will make sure I just remove the seeds and discard the non-seed material. I'll be sure to pop up on the screen what the seeds of sea holly look like in case you're interested. You can see that we have removed all the seeds from this stalk right here. I'm going to follow it all the way down, and I'm just going to remove each of these flower stalks now. Flower stalks are just getting cut up into smaller pieces, and any of this yard waste or plant material that we're getting will just get added to my compost pile. The smaller the pieces that you add to your compost pile, the quicker this material will break down. If this material was diseased, I would not be adding it to my compost pile. It would just be going into the trash bin. I still have quite a few sea holly plants to deal with here. Let me do the same process that I just showed you, and then I'll show you what's next. Here's my compost bin, and you can see there are some wood shavings in there for my brown material. We're going to add any green material that we collect into this compost bin, add some water, and give it a good mixing. I was able to collect 2 large gallon-sized Ziploc bags of sea holly seed. I'm going to put them on a piece of paper. I'm going to let them dry for about a week, and then I can go ahead and remove the seeds and put them in storage. And I'm going to put them in a cool, dark, dry location, and they're going to be stored in Ziploc bags. There are a lot of flower seeds that birds love to eat, and sea holly is one of them. However, I have so many plants all around my yard that are going to seed, so I'm not too concerned about taking those seeds away from the birds. I love the birds just like anyone else, and there's plenty of food for them to forage on. My concern is if I left the sea holly seeds on there, yes, the birds would eat some of it, which is great, but then a lot of it would drop to the ground here. And last year, I had kept the sea holly seeds on my plant for that reason, for the birds. What happened was I ended up with a ton of sea holly seedlings all around this area. And if you know anything about sea holly has a very deep taproot to it, and it's very hard to move once it establishes itself. So as it is, I'm going to have to come in here and remove all the sea holly seedlings that are all around this rock, and that will be on a different day. Now I know a bunch of seeds of the sea holly plant already dropped in this area. That's fine, but I didn't want any more than that. So I'm glad that we took care of that task, which was removing the sea holly seeds and removing the stalks of those plants. The next thing we're going to tackle is removing peony cages from around my peonies. And while we're doing that, we're also going to be cutting the plants back. Some people like to leave the peony plants there until a frost has hit them and then they've died back. I feel that enough energy has been stored for the peony plant to produce beautiful flowers for next year. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and clean it up and cut it way back. There are certain plants that you should be cutting back at the end of every season, and peonies are one of them. What I'll do is put up on the screen other plants that you should be cutting back at the end of the season. You don't want to leave them up for the whole winter. I just used my hand pruners and I cut these plants down all the way down to the base of the plant. Since the leaves of the peony plant are not diseased, I can also go ahead and I can cut them back into smaller pieces, and these will also get added to my compost pile. When you have a compost pile, you want to have green material as well as brown material. And yard waste, as long as it's not diseased, is always a great green material for your compost bin. And before we know it, my leaves are going to be falling from all the trees in my yard. I'll be shredding up those leaves and I'll be adding those to my compost bin. And that's a great brown or carbon material for the bin. I have a few more peony plants over here and some more behind me over there. Let me do the same thing and then I'll show you what's next. All of the peonies have been cut back, and for right now, all I'm doing is I'm just adding all of the green material. In the end is when I'm going to mix it all up. Together we cut the peony that was right over here, and then I went ahead and I cut back one peony from over here. Another one was cut from right over in this side here, and then right in front of this miscanthus ornamental grass, there were 3 peonies, and those have been cut back as well. The next plant that we're going to cut back is this big guy over here. This is called baptisia or false indigo. It has gone to seed, and I had made a video showing you my process for collecting the seeds from this plant. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut back the seed pods, and I can save the seeds. And after we've done that, we're going to go ahead and cut back this baptisia. I'm using my hand pruners again, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut back the stalk that the seed pods are on. And when you shake it, you can hear the rattling noise. That's the seeds that are inside of the seed pods. And what you're looking at on the screen right now are what the seeds look like inside of the seed pods. I had already collected a bunch of seeds off of this plant, but this is what I left behind. And once again, I'm going to follow each stalk down to the base, and I'm just going to cut it at the base. For years, I used to wait until a frost came, and that's when I would go ahead and start cleaning up my flower beds. I've learned over time that that is extremely overwhelming for me. And I truly believe that when it comes to gardening, yes, there are rules that we should follow, but we don't have to follow every single rule. It depends on your time that you have. It depends on how big of a garden you have. It depends on what your schedule is going to look like when that first frost or freeze hits. Maybe you have some other commitments. Maybe you're going to be traveling. Maybe you have a special event coming up. You really need to tackle your garden chores based on your schedule and what works best for you. So when it comes to something like cleaning my flower beds out, it's really just a matter of weeks when my first frost is going to hit. And I don't believe that these plants are really going to lose much if I cut them back now, because I have so many other flower beds I need to tackle. And I feel strongly that a lot of these plants have already stored up enough energy to be productive and robust for next year. And when the leaves do fall here in New England, it's like it covers it almost like snow. There's leaves everywhere. And then that's a whole chore just to keep removing the leaves from the flower beds off of the lawn. And because I like to collect them and I like to shred them, I will be looking for green material. And so I am basically stockpiling all this green material in anticipation for those leaves falling. But I'm also doing this because some of my flower beds, like the one that we're working on right now, are looking a little bit tired. They're looking a little overgrown, and I want them to look nice and tidy. And I had thought about doing a garden tour today because I'd really like to do a garden tour for the end of the month. But I figured rather than me cleaning that flower bed and then just showing you what the flower bed looks like afterwards, I thought it's important to show you what I'm doing in terms of cleaning that flower bed and then how nice it's going to look when it's all done. I feel like those mums really look so beautiful this time of year, as well as the dianthus, but I felt like a lot of this overgrown material was taken away from that beauty. So by doing what we're doing, we're just going to make that flower bed look that much nicer. In terms of this baptisia, this was actually just a little seedling. I had a seed that had dropped and this plant appeared because I used to have plants there and I had removed them all. But obviously one seedling stayed behind and it turned into a big, huge shrub. It's not in the most optimal location. And again, based on, the rules of gardening, when it comes to baptisia, they say that you're not, I have a little tiny caterpillar. I'm trying to just save its life. So when it comes to that baptisia, my plan for it is actually to dig it up and divide it. and I may keep part of it in that flower bed, but I don't want it where it is right now. It's right next to the rocks that are in that flower bed, so it's not in the most ideal location. So even though the rules say you're not supposed to dig up baptisia and move it because of its taproot, I have successfully done it. I prefer to actually do it this time of year. I can actually see its growth points for next year, and based on those growth points, I can make my divisions and my cuts. And there's a lot that I actually want to do in that flower bed. So just by doing this cleanup, it's allowing me to now access plants such as this baptisia and do what I want to do in there. I also have a bunch of daffodils that look so beautiful in the springtime, and they really need to be divided. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you have a lot of spring blooming bulbs in your yard, those as well should be divided probably every 3 to 5 years. Because what's going to happen with some of your spring bulbs, especially daffodils, is that they eventually will just be producing a lot of leaves and not as many blooms. So if you want to increase your stock in daffodils in your yard, now is also a great time to go ahead, dig them and divide them. And in my case, I know exactly where all those daffodils are. So it will be a fairly easy task for me to do that. But I can't access those daffodils until I remove a lot of these type of plants because they're in the way. When it comes to how small to cut these pieces for my compost pile, it's really up to you. If you didn't want to cut them at all, you didn't have to cut them at all. You could just put them as is in your compost pile. It will just take that much longer for this material to break down. If I wanted to, I could have cut these even smaller, but that would just take so much longer to do. So I'm okay with the size that I'm cutting these up. And when you do cut them in small pieces like this, not only do they break down faster, but also when it comes time to turn your compost pile, it's a little bit easier to turn the compost pile if the material in there is not so big. I don't have a lot of cut flowers in my yard, but if I did, the baptisia leaves would look so pretty if I wanted to take the leaves and put them in an arrangement with, let's say, a bunch of zinnias. So next year I am planning on growing zinnias in my yard. I have grown them in the past. It's just been a few years. And what I'm planning to do is use the leaves of the baptisia in conjunction with those zinnia. I think they would look so pretty this time of year. When it comes to the seeds that we're collecting off of the perennials like this baptisia, I prefer to use the winter sowing method when it comes to starting the seeds. A lot of perennials, not all, but a lot of perennials need what's called a cold stratification period. So you could take the seeds and put them in your refrigerator for a certain period of time so that they get that stratification period. But I prefer to just take the seeds, put them in milk jugs, and just put them out during the winter months. And they will sprout whenever they're ready, when the conditions are right for them. And I did that a few years ago, and I ended up with a ton of baptisia seedlings. In fact, in my backyard plant nursery that I have where I sell plants, which is just on my driveway, I have a whole bunch of these seedlings ready for sale for next year. I sold a bunch this year, but I still have a bunch to sell for next year. And that's a big reason why I do like to save my seeds from my plants, is I like to then grow these plants from seed. And when it comes to baptisia, if you are going to grow them from seed, it might take 2 or 3 years for those plants to actually produce blooms. Look how much nicer this area is already looking. And this was my goal, was to really just open up this area because I wanted us to be able to enjoy those mums. Look how pretty they are now that you can actually see them. And you might have noticed I left behind some more tall plants over here. And these are all echinacea, or purple coneflower. Now, I know the birds love those as well, but I have those in a number of areas of my yard. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to collect the seeds off of each of these plants here. And then the same thing, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut each of these plants back. Now, if you were to leave all these on here, yes, the birds would enjoy these, but also the birds would drop these and the seeds would go everywhere. And you would end up with a bunch of little plants in your flower bed. And in many cases, we want that. However, in this particular flower bed, I do not want that. It's a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of work for me, actually, to come in and to dig up all those seedlings. So now we've gone ahead and we've removed all of the seed pods here. I'm going to put those in a Ziploc bag, and on a different day, I will collect the seeds from here. And I'll make sure that, again, I dry out the seeds for about a week before I store them. And in case you're curious, there's a link down in the description below showing you the process for collecting echinacea seeds. And I'm also showing on the screen what the seeds look like on an echinacea plant in case you want to collect some for yourself. Look at all the seed pods, and that was just from the plants in this one area. It's quite a repetitive chore, but all I'm doing here is I'm coming down, following each flower stalk to the base, and I'm cutting it at the base. The next thing we're going to tackle is calendula. That's considered an annual here where I live. What I love about it is it's blossom this time of year because we love to look at oranges and purples and yellows during the fall months. But these plants have become very leggy. Also, they've started to go to seed. Now, I will be collecting their seeds, but I'm going to be sprinkling the seeds on the other side of the flower bed over there because every year this plant comes up over here because it self-sows and it blooms beautifully here. I want to have this plant in other areas of my garden here. So I'm going to take the seeds and I'm going to sprinkle them over behind me. I have made a video also that shows you how to collect the seeds of calendula. And what I'll do is I'll put a link to that video down below, and I'll also pop up on the screen right now what the seeds of the calendula plant look like in case you're interested in collecting seeds for yourself. Calendula tends to get very leggy as the season goes on, so it's very important to cut back or prune back your plants. And also, it's very important to deadhead your plant so that it puts the energy into producing more blooms and not into producing seeds. However, I am glad that the plant has produced some seeds so I can collect them and scatter them in other areas of my bed. If I wanted to, I could collect the seeds and store them as well, but I have a lot of these seeds already stored. So I'm just coming in here and I'm just cutting off these seed heads that are here so that I can then scatter these elsewhere in my garden. And look at all those seeds right there. I feel confident that some seeds have already dropped in this area, so I will be getting more of these plants in this flower bed in this section next year. And I'm just very liberally spreading the seeds over in a different section of this flower bed. And whatever comes up next year comes up. Even though I should have cut these back a few weeks ago, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to sacrifice some of the flower buds. We're going to sacrifice some of the blooms in order to get a shorter, bushier plant. And of course, there is a chance that a frost will hit these plants and we might not see blooms on them again. But I'm willing to take that chance at this time. And I'm just making my cuts down below near a leaf node. With this plant right here, you can see it's nice and bushy at the bottom here. But then there is a longer piece that's very leggy. I know it may seem a bit harsh, but it had to be done. Those plants were extremely leggy, and the whole goal right now is to just get this bed to look a little bit cleaner and a little bit tidier. Next up, we have a couple of Asiatic lilies that are over here, and at this point, we're just going to cut those back. I haven't decided at this point whether or not I want to keep these Asiatic lilies here. I did like them in this flower bed, but I don't love the placement of them. But I may love the placement of them after the rhododendron gets removed. For right now, anyway, we're going to leave these lilies here, but I just want to cut them back. Pretty much the only thing remaining in this area that's still tall and kind of leggy is this cosmos. I am going to save that for later on. I am going to remove it for this video, but I'm going to make a video showing you how to collect the seeds from a cosmos plant. So we're not going to do that as part of this video. Let's move on to the next area of this bed. The next plant that we're going to cut down is called the great blue lobelia. That's a perennial here, and you can see a tiny bit of it right there, and that's the stalk of it. Now, that is a plant that when it goes to seed, it has a ton of seeds, and you end up with little baby great blue lobelia all over your flower bed. Again, if given a certain situation, you might want that plant to go to seed and be all over your flower bed. However, I don't want that. I have this plant in a number of places in my yard. I don't need any more baby plants. So in order to prevent that plant from self-sowing and having little baby plants everywhere, I am absolutely going to be cutting that plant right down at this time before it starts to go to seed. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but I do have a video that shows you how to collect the seed from great blue lobelia in case you're interested. I'm following it all the way down and I'm going to cut. There are a whole bunch more great blue lobelia over in this flower bed here. I'm going to do the same thing, just follow them down and cut them. Okay, friends, my project is done for today. As is the case with all types of gardening, are projects ever 100% complete? I'd say no. And there's a certain point where you have to say to yourself, that's okay. I am very, very happy with what we got done today. And I'm just showing you a different angle of this flower bed. The Joe Pye weed will stay because I do want it to go to seed. I think the birds will enjoy it. And it's still putting on some nice, beautiful color. And just near the Joe Pye weed is a small patch of coneflower. On a different day, I will come in here and I'll do the same thing. I'll collect the seed heads off of the coneflower and I'll cut that back. And what I like noticing this time of year, which is very important, is that the placement of the coneflower is not optimal. Optimally, it would be out away from this miscanthus as well as the Joe Pye weed. So in the fall, I like moving perennials around because I can see the placement and the spacing of all my plants. In the spring, it's really hard to tell that type of spacing. And I did end up cutting quite a few plants back over in this area here. There was the great blue lobelia, there was actually a bunch of yarrow, and there was even some perennial baby's breath, which honestly I don't love. I will be getting rid of it either this year or early next spring. And I did leave this plant here. This is globe thistle, and it has gone to seed. I want to collect the seeds from it. I'm going to create a video showing you how to collect the seeds from globe thistle. So that's why I'm leaving that there. Once I collect the seeds from that plant, I will go ahead and I will cut that plant back as well to ground level. Down here, there's a tall phlox. I'm leaving it because I want to collect the seeds from that. And then right near the tall phlox over here is a white colored gayfeather or liatris. And I want to collect the seeds from that as well. So I'm leaving that there also. Right here is a type of coneflower. I believe it's called paradoxa. It's a yellow colored coneflower. The birds have definitely been feasting on the seeds, which is quite fine, but I do want to collect a few seeds off of that. After I've collected the seeds from that, I will be cutting that down to ground level. And this side of the flower bed is looking so much nicer, so much cleaner, just more open. And you can really enjoy those mums now from this angle. And as I just mentioned earlier, when it comes to this plant here, the cosmos, I'll be collecting some seeds from that. And after I collect the seeds from the cosmos, I'm just going to be cutting that down to ground level. There will be a lot of changes happening in this bed this year as well as next year. All of the sea holly needs to be removed. The baptisia needs to be removed. All of those echinacea or purple coneflower need to be removed. And with regards to some of those plants, I may move them to other areas of this bed, but I know I don't need all of those plants. So many of those plants will get potted up from my plant nursery. I'll either end up selling them or I'll be moving them to other parts of my yard. But they should not be around this rock. Around this rock are a ton of spring bulbs, including the daffodils. And my hope is this year, once I've removed a lot of these perennials, I can then get in there and I can dig up those daffodils to divide because they really do need to be divided. The bird bath needs to be cleaned. That can be done on a different day. That's probably the easiest part of this project. And then there are plants that had dropped their seeds that I will end up just cleaning up and digging those up. But boy, what a difference it looks now. It just looks so much nicer, this flower bed. I like a clean look. I feel like because this is the main entryway that everyone comes to when they enter the house, I want it to look a little bit nicer, a little bit more formal like this. And I love how the mums look next to the dianthus here. And on this side of the flower bed, similar plants that we already talked about that I'm going to be collecting the seeds from them. Once I collect the seeds from these plants, I'll be cutting the plants down to ground level. That's all going to be happening during the next few days. And I just want to give you a final look of the flower bed. And what I really like also is you can look right in there and you can see the mums you can see whatever plants are over near the porch. Looks a lot more open. I've made a lot of videos showing my process for making compost. And to be honest, I don't get too hung up on ratios. I just make sure I'm adding green materials. I'm making sure that I'm adding brown materials. I'm making sure that my pile is not too wet, not too dry. And whenever I have a chance, I come out here and I just mix it. And what happens over time is that the pile shrinks because it's cooking, it's heating up, and there are all sorts of insects and bugs that are eating the material, the green material. And when all those worms and insects and bugs are in here, they are creating heat, and that's causing all the green material to basically decompose. And I'm sure there's a lot more that I could explain when it comes to composting, but this video is not intended to go over the full process. It's just to show you what I'm doing with all my green material that I'm collecting from my garden. But of course, I will be sure to put a link down in the description below of my playlist, because I have made a lot of videos that go over my process for composting. I really hope you enjoyed watching me tackle this flower bed. It is go time in terms of cleaning flower beds, and do what you can. Pace yourself, because it is a project, it is a chore to clean up our flower beds. It's very important to do, but use your own judgment when it comes to which plants you want to leave up for the winter, which plants you want to cut back for the winter. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop them down in the comment section below. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. You don't want to miss out on any other videos just like this one. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.